Guns continue to be a hot topic in this midterm election. Where do you stand on the balance between the Second Amendment and gun control? Mr. Bjorkman, you're up first.
Well, I don't think there has to be any balance. The Second Amendment is part of the Constitution, Sammy. That's the law. The Supreme Court rules on it. So I think that there are some common sense things we can do to reduce gun violence while protecting the constitutional rights of the vast number of lawful gun owners to own their guns and enjoy them however they want. I come from a family of gun owners. Am a gun owner myself, and you know, I also as a judge saw how the benefit of the protection order process can help diffuse violence when one person is threatening behavior to another. But what we don't have is cases to address when one person is threatening an unspecified group of people. For example, school shootings, where in 60% of those cases, someone knew it was going to happen. And so one key thing we can do is adopt red flag laws that allow a quick temporary protection hearing with sworn statements and then an expedited hearing where both sides can be heard, and allow guns temporarily to be removed just like they can in a protection order case in our state today where there's a spousal issue or two people fighting over a boundary. So that's one. Second thing is we should expand our registries to have universal background checks, to have universal background checks. And private transactions, in my view, should be able to be accomplished at your local police station or sheriff's office. Private gun owners shouldn't have to pay to have that done. I think that's something we can do to help facilitate the process, and people ought to be able to pass on their guns to the next generation without going through that process. I think we need to look at the Sandy Hook Promise that tries to identify at-risk kids and work with them, because a lot of the school shooters struggle between suicide and homicide, and there are some real issues that they identify that we can address. And finally, we've got to keep in mind that 60% of the gun deaths are suicides, and 90% of those are people who were mentally ill when they took their lives. So we've got to address the important role, again, of mental health care in treating people's needs.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bjorkman. Mr. Johnson, where do you stand between the Second Amendment and the gun control debate?
Well, I'm a proud proponent of the Second Amendment. I am incredibly skeptical of any idea that would restrict the rights of law-abiding gun owners. And so when I think about gun control, I think more about the responsibility that I think any gun owner has to have. Just a few weekends ago, my two older sons and I went out and shot shotguns. I think people who own handguns or own any kind of gun, shotguns, rifles, I think they have an obligation to make sure that they know how to properly and respectfully use them. I think that Second Amendment right comes with some obligations. I think you have to make sure that your firearms are properly stored. Of course we've got locks, gun locks on any firearm that we've got in our home. And Tim's right. I mean, Tim and I agree that mental health is an underappreciated problem when it comes to our nation's violence. 60% of gun deaths are suicides. And so things like bump stocks and cartridge size are not going to save those lives. I mean, we are a country that is struggling under the burdens of a massive mental health problem. We have 100 drug overdose deaths a day. We have 100 suicides a day. And as I mentioned before, we've got 40 million adults who are suffering with mental health problems. And that's what we need to be focusing on. You know, it's fine to have a conversation about the guns, but when people want to talk about the guns, they're normally concerned about the behavior of people who are struggling. And we need to help the people. That's how we're going to make real progress.